Friday afternoon so far. And we're going to introduce our very prolific speaker and the last speaker of this conference series. It's Professor Dr. Tony Kashani from our very own Foothill College. He is a fantastic colleague of ours. He teaches at the Humanities department, and he has a very strong history of being one of the most prolific professors of our department. Dr. Kashani is an Iranian-American author. He's an educator and a cultural critic. He holds a PhD degree in humanities from the California Institute of Integral Studies and is the author of 5 books on media. In today's talk, Dr. Kashani will talk about how neoliberal market fundamentalism has become an ethics in and of itself. How did we get there? What role does AI play in this digitally designed and operated ecology? How can we put ethics back into everyday life? So this talk explicates these conditions and is a call for action to turn AI in favor of humanity for social justice. So we are welcoming Dr. Kashani over here, and I give it to you from here, Dr. Kashani. And for anyone who has questions for Dr. Kashani can later on ask questions during the Q&As after we finish our talk with him.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wall. Fabulous introduction, so I hope I can live up to it. How is everyone doing today?
Good.
I'm guessing not so bad. It's a Friday after all, and in the Western world, you know, Fridays are celebrated because it's the opening for the weekend. Although we used to have weekends for relaxation, lots and lots of people work on the weekends, and it wasn't supposed to be that way. Can we blame AI for that? Lots of people can make lots of arguments about the evils of AI. Now, here's the thing. Oftentimes, when I get into conversations with people about artificial intelligence and the new technologies and so on, some people are under the assumption that AI is kind of like a Leviathan, you know, that sea monster that gobbles up the material world, biblical references and so on, come on. Or a behemoth, the monster of the desert and so forth. So it's like this one entity that's out there and it's all evil. Well, the fact of the matter is that artificial intelligence, AI for short, actually underpins many aspects of our lives. And by our lives, I mean modern life. And a good portion of humanity, at least 4 billion of us, are directly connected to AI-related technologies. And so from banking to schooling to basically any kind of transactional humanistic activity that we have, we're dealing with AI, and this AI is dealing with us. And there are different levels to it, right? There is the low intelligence, mid intelligence, and high intelligence AI. And the whole ecosystem of AI is what we should consider when we talk about artificial intelligence coming to take over the world and so forth. So let me go ahead and share screen, and I have a little PowerPoint presentation prepared for you, and we'll go slide by slide and get into some discussions. And once I finish my presentation, ideally we'll have time for Q&A, and we can talk then and have good dialogues. And then afterwards, I think at 3 o'clock, there's a roundtable that I was invited to participate in, and I'll be happy to expand upon some of the ideas and questions that you may have. And hopefully, it'll be a fruitful get-together today at this session as well as the other session. So let's see if I can get here and do the share. Okay. Does everyone see the title page?
Yes.
A couple of thumbs up will do. Right. Great. Okay. So I've contextualized this talk to be about AI and general new technologies of the 21st century in what I call, and many other academics call, using the term neoliberalism. And I'll explain what all of that means. So, but before we get to any of this stuff, let's get some definitions out of the way and all get on the same page. So when people talk about social justice, right, there's this general idea that many people have of social justice. Basically, people think of fairness, right? What is fair? Well, there are many aspects to social justice. We have racial justice, and increasingly we're paying attention to environmental justice with the climate crises and all the changes that are happening in our environment. And for us to think that we're separated from nature and we're not part of it is a huge folly. And we've made that mistake for many decades, the past century and in this century as well. Then there is the notion of sexual orientation and identity, gender identity, national identity, religious identity, and this fluid notion of identity and fairness about owning one's identity and building upon it and so forth. And we also have to think about other species that are fellow members of this ecosystem of nature and the universe as a whole. So there are virtues that regulate our relationship with other people. And those virtues is what we base our social justice thinking, hopefully policies, in way of life. And that's what I mean when I say social justice in a holistic term and not just one thing or the other. So, and there's also a lot of talk about equity, right? It's a buzzword these days in the academy. Right? People talk about, oh, we have a workshop on equity and then go ahead and attend this webinar on equity and find out about equity and what we're doing with it and all that. What this is about is, again, being fair, impartial, and equal access to things, but it goes beyond access. That's why I've chosen this slide here. Right? There's equality where everybody goes and gets to the fence and looks out there that, you know, the mountaintop is there and the happiness is there. Then there's equity where, right, okay, everybody at the same level. But we have to get to the next phase, and that is empowerment. Without empowerment, we cannot open the doors. We cannot open the doors on an egalitarian basis for everyone. So I think that's important when we start talking about and considering the notions of social justice and equity and so on. I want to recommend a program that I started watching last week, Colin in Black and White. And I'll make the assumption that everybody knows Colin Kaepernick, at least at a cursory level, his name and the stance he took by not taking a stance during the national anthem when he was a football player for the 49ers. And recently, Netflix has put together with the filmmaker who made Selma. And her name is Ava. I'm sorry, I should have written the name down, but I'll get it jotted down and answer in the Q&A. And they put together this program and about Colin Kaepernick's transformation, right? When he was a child, adopted child by white parents, living in a conservative little town in Turlock, California, and how the trajectory of his life and how he's come to this day. But it's not all about him. It's a history lesson, a history of racism that ties into the economic system and the power dynamics in the United States. So I highly recommend this program. I want to get an idea of this, racial justice and socioeconomic justice is about, right? Take a look at this program. It's at the same time that it's history lessons, it's very entertaining too. And it's a gripping drama series. So there's the plug for Colin in Black and White. And then a question may come up. What is neoliberalism? Right? I like this definition by Joseph Schwartz, who is an activist, leftist, intellectual, etc. I'm going to read it for you. Neoliberalism is a form of capitalism in which the state deregulates the economy. Deregulation is key here, which is opens up doors for big corporations and billionaires to basically become in charge of the world, as it were. Destroys unions, because unions is about the workers and the masses coming together and gaining power to stand up to the power of big corporations, etc. Decreases taxes on the rich and corporations. And we saw this play out in the United States in 2017 when Congress, the Republican Congress, passed the new tax laws where billionaires, for the first time in the history of this nation, have enjoyed the highest level of tax evasion, in my view. It defunds public goods while repressing and policing the poor, particularly people of color. We've seen that happen with the movements and the backlash against movements such as Black Lives Matter. Then we're talking about, big business interests, removes protections of labor law, et cetera, et cetera. I won't get into a whole lecture on neoliberalism, but if you're interested, I've got this YouTube talk. It's about 45 minutes on neoliberalism. You can just find it on YouTube and go for it. And of course, there are many resources, other talks that you can find, Google and YouTube and other resources and so forth, and educate yourself on the roots of neoliberalism, how it became more powerful when Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, in tandem started accelerating the process of hypercapitalism, and then started, promoting deregulation of everything. Then it brings us to the point where high tech enjoys this absolute deregulation, where the wild, wild west of the high tech is actually opaque to many lawmakers, but they know what they're doing, right? And it's the same old narrative of capitalists wanting to dominate and take over the market, as well as increasingly every aspect of our lives, in our living rooms, even in our bedrooms, in our psyche, and so on. So it is a fact, looking at the research on new technologies, looking at how fast things move, that within the next 30 years, we're going to have profound changes to human societies. And let's just say the global society, collectively speaking, or one global society, than we did the last 300 years, as with the agricultural societies turning into, with the Industrial Revolution, turning into industrial societies. Then we had an education system evolved or devolved, you could say, into a vocational training system. Humanities used to be the foundation of an education. Then gradually it was removed and marginalized. And now we have, STEM for everything, ethics out the window, and all the rest of it. So this is, as alarming as it sounds, it's also exciting because we have an opportunity to turn the tables on this trajectory and create a new trajectory and move forward. And we'll talk about that. So these are the facts. There's an institute called the Future Institute, and that they send me reports, and I subscribe to their reportage. Once a year, they have this. If you print it up, it's this thick, right? Of the future trends. What are the new technologies? What's happening around the world, and so forth. And they predict the future. What I'm noticing is that they are kind of late, because once a year is not going to do it. As things are moving forward with machine learning and artificial intelligence kind of becoming the deus ex machina of the device of the gods, and changing things at a rapid pace, those reports need to come out at least once a month. Okay, so I looked around and found this timeline, and it only goes up to 2017, but there's some points of departure that we should, I think, pay attention to. Starting in 1950, many people decide to use this year as the point of departure, because that's where Alan Turing proposed this idea, the Turing test that many of you are familiar with, right? If the machine can trick you into thinking that it's human, and so you think, oh, I'm talking to a human. And this happens all the time. Customer service organizations. You go to any company, whether it's Home Depot or even Google or Amazon, anybody, the first point of contact is a chatbot that sometimes can fool you into thinking that you're talking to a human. So, hi, I'm Brian. Can I help you? And artificial intelligence kind of playing with us, toying with the idea that, hey, you're talking with a human. So 1950 was the start of intellectually thinking about what AI could be. Like, this goes back, like the idea of artificial intelligence is nothing new. It's not like a 20th century phenomenon, right? This goes back to the days of Aristotle, like 350 BC. They were thinking about this stuff, thinking that, in the future, there'll be machines that, weave things for us and all that. What's that? What are the implications of that? Because, those guys, the Greeks, and then later the Germans and the French, and these philosophers of the Western world, were always thinking about the ethical implications, right? They were essentially moral philosophers. The ethical implications of new technologies. This is one of the reasons why Plato was so apprehensive about writing things down. Socrates was adamant about not writing anything down. But Plato caved in and allowed writing, and thank God that he did. And that was a new technology, and he was worried about this, right? Worried about the watered down versions of things and misinterpretations and misunderstandings and manipulation of masses vis-a-vis the writing technology. So fast forward, and you get to places. This one is really interesting. In 2016, Microsoft created this chatbot, right? AI essentially, that they released on Twitter. And they thought, wow, this is the most clever thing ever, right? And it didn't even take a day. And some of you may be familiar with the story. It didn't even take a day for Tay to receive information, racist, misogynistic, sexist, the most awful hate messages that people were just typing in interaction with Tay, and Tay started internalizing those, analyzing it, and then turning it into, because AI is an objective machinery, and thinks, well, this is the information I'm getting. This is the world in which I live. So let me go and be on top of it. So it started producing propaganda messages, Nazi propaganda, white supremacy, and all kinds of awful things. And of course, Microsoft quickly got rid of it. Another example of things going rogue is when Amazon created this AI-based program for recruiting, hoping that they'll sell this to all companies that are looking to hire people. What they have done is collected data for about 10 years of different attributes that people have for job skills and so on and so forth. And it turned out that the program, the AI, preferred male candidates, white male candidates, to be more specific. And because the data, based on the bias of the people who were collecting the data and choosing which ones to feed into the system, was all masculine, white male preferred kind of thing. So the AI prioritized the white male masculine types. So they stopped that, and thank God for that. So it behooves us to pay attention to the emerging technologies, what's already here, what's going to happen, and how we're going to deal with this new ecology of various technologies. Artificial intelligence, obviously, we're talking about that, the 5G data networks, and all of these are interconnected. So it's not like, they're separated entities here. Natural language processing is an interesting one that many different companies, including Google and Amazon, are working on. And smaller companies that, cottage industries around them and so forth, where AI is going to produce the natural languages that human beings have at much faster speed. It will learn it and it would reproduce it. So in the future, and the Chinese are already doing some of this, you will have news anchors that are actually not human, but artificial intelligent robots, and they're talking to us as if they're human. And I wonder to what extent they can fool us. Certainly not in the beginning, but towards the toddler age of this new technologies, perhaps we'll get fooled. And then there's edge computing. Self-driving cars is a good example of that. Facial recognition, kind of dangerous because so many biases are involved in facial recognition. And we've already seen that happen in law enforcement and other agencies are using it. And that's problematic. We'll talk about that too. So let's get into the ethics of this stuff, because after all, this talk, me being a humanities person, is about ethics, right? With neoliberalism, the market is considered an ethics in and of itself. And of course, that's a huge humanistic moral mistake. To think that the market will be an objective entity and will be fair. Like, a landlord deciding, well, I'm gonna charge $5,000 for a 900 square foot apartment in the middle of San Francisco because that's what the market bears, and that's fair, right? Those are the ethics of that landlord. Is that fair? Is that equitable? Is that the right thing to do? I think most of you will answer, of course not. Some of you may be thinking, but that's what I've been told at the business school all these years. The market, we have to pay attention to the dynamics of the market. Well, let me tell you, no. So what are the ethical problems? Well, one of the factors that's involved here is that people who are in technologies are trained to focus on the code and not so much focus on the implications of the code. Be excited in the lab, right? Be excited about the new app that you're developing. Be excited about creating the robot that's going to take care of all human problems and so on, right? But don't worry about, what this may do to humanity in the future. Well, let me recommend another show, television show that many of you may know about already, Silicon Valley, an HBO show. I think it recently ended with the last episode of the last season. And it's a comedy series, 22 minutes each, 28 minutes each episode. A group of young people, techies, create this company called Pied Piper. And Richard, who is at the head of the company, is an ethical person or tries to be an ethical person. But within the Silicon Valley environment, he's forced to do unethical things in order to find ethical ends. So it's like a means to an end process. So it's a brilliant depiction of the ethics of Silicon Valley. And in many ways is realistic. So here's a question that I often ask people. To what extent do we learn about philosophy, literature, the arts, religion, mythology, history? And I'm talking about the history of the world, not just the standard whitewashed, US version of Columbus discovered America kind of stuff. None of that. Real history, whose narratives, right? Multiple perspectives, facts that are not omitted, bringing into the history. To what extent are we learning that? Geography. How many Americans know where the United States is located in relation to the rest of the world? How many Americans recognize that only 5% population of the world, we're producing all this garbage? We are, and then we are choosing, Silicon Valley is right here in the Bay Area, and lots of the prescriptions for human behavior are produced out of Silicon Valley. So that's kind of a dangerous system that is in place. So anthropology is important. You have to understand human cultures and the genealogy of human cultures and so on, et cetera, the interdisciplinary collection in humanities. Do we learn that stuff K through 12 and beyond? Of course, in college, we have opportunities to pick and choose classes that sometimes become transformative experiences. I personally have had transformative experiences in higher ed. And that's where I prioritize. To what extent can my pedagogy be a transformative pedagogy? I'm always striving for that. So I'll give you an example of how other countries are, when you take a survey of what other countries are doing with the K through 12. For example, in France, in order to graduate from high school, and other countries have this too, but France in particular, is important. You have to have completed successfully a coursework in philosophy. So you've got to know how to ask questions, right? Why is this here? Why are we doing this? What does it all mean, right? What are the implications of this action, and so on? So what do we prefer? Where's our value system? That's important. Right? And when we're talking about, technologies taking over, to what extent are they forming our consciousness and shaping our value systems? Are we the metrics people where everything is in numbers, right? Learning being measured in terms of numbers, human connections, human empathy, human care, in essence. Could you put that in terms of numbers and then quantitatively decide what to do with it? I don't think so. The book of life, as in Charlie Brown is saying, is the answers in the book of life are not in the back, right? Humanity is about uncertainty. So to what extent is AI about uncertainty? It's a good question to be asking. I was recently reading something written by Stuart Russell, who is a pioneer in the field of AI. And, he started this center called the Human Compatible AI. It's over at UC Berkeley. He's been at UC Berkeley for over 30 years. And these guys are thinking about the future, right? The future that is now, not the future that's going to happen 50 years from now. Like what's happening in Glasgow, talking about, 2070, we'll go to net zero. And that was Modi in India talking that nonsense. But these guys, Stuart Russell and his company, are scholars and researchers. This is physicists and some ethicists come together. What they're talking about is let's not let something like the atomic bomb situation happen again. And you know what happened with the atomic bomb, right? Physicists were getting really excited about the theory of splitting the atom. So they get together and go, wow, theoretically, look at this mathematical equations. We can split the atom this way, but hey, that will never happen, right? How can we even do that? We can't imagine that. 24 hours later, it happens. Then Oppenheimer, develops the atomic bomb. And next thing you know, you've got people that want to dominate the world making the decision to actually use it. And who uses it? The United States of America on 2 cities. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, more than 200,000 people were dead as a result of using that technology. So Russell was saying that, let's not let that happen. Let's predict that what we're saying will happen and have contingencies for it. So they're working on the notion of kill switch for the AI. How can we do that, right? And talk about uncertainty and how we can feed and teach AI to think like humans and human objectives and recognize that, we're uncertain about things and we have to meditate and cogitate with decisions before we make them, right? We can also talk about that some more later. So sometimes people get a little confused about this whole business of algorithms, right? It gets thrown around all the time, the word algorithm. Oh, algorithms are written to manipulate us, to predict our behavior, to control us. Yes, they are. Facebook and Google are very good at this. Particularly Facebook is very good at writing algorithms to put us in the fight or flight mode and make us angry and make a little screen with, say, like 500 people getting together seem like it's the world. Like, oh my goodness, billions of people think like me. So let's go after those others who are our enemies and so forth. So algorithm, you input a set of rules that human beings decide. This is absolutely subjective. There's no objectivity here. That's a subjective set of rules to obtain the expected output from the given input. So let's say, say I want people to buy my cars. I got 10 cars on the lot, and can you create an algorithm where this result, the output of my 10 cars being sold, would happen? Right? Facebook will say, sure, no problem. We have profiles on all these people that are looking for these specific cars, and we'll get them to you. And they've been very successful with that, right? Because what they do is they collect our data and they feed it into the machine learning process that they have, and they create these algorithms that do targeted marketing. Now, that's with products, but it's also with ideas, right? Because it makes money for them. So should everything be reduced to the bottom line? I say no. Okay, so this is the world in which we live. The truth is treated so casually that fake news poses as real news. People don't even bother checking any kind of facts, and confirmation bias is in play. We're always looking for somebody else to agree with us, and then we agree with them, and the next thing you know, we're all angry, and we think that we have all the answers, and then righteousness sets in, right? How does AI facilitate this? Well, when we say AI, it's not like the technology in and of itself is facilitating it at first. Later it is, right? Because no technology is neutral. So let's not fall for that, fallacy. Oh, technology is neutral, right? Oh, handgun is a neutral. It's the person that kills other people. Well, the handgun was manufactured to be a killing machine, right? So there was an objective behind it. And then the ideological apparatus around it created this gun ownership, gun usage, and gun culture. And look at where we are with guns in this country, where people are killing each other with guns instead of, at least yelling at each other, just arguing. Say, hey, I disagree with you, but I'm not going to kill you, and I'm just going to be angry at you. We're way past that point. So AI, again, think about it, right? It becomes a cycle here. There is our behavior, and there's input into the AI, machines learning from one another, creating new algorithms based on the analysis of the data. Then output comes in, and then you've got content, and then more input into our consciousness. In the brain is our machine that processes and develops our consciousness, right? And then again, that comes out, say you as a result of getting all that information, you suddenly start developing a bias against LGBTQ community, right? So what is the output? Bad behavior, right? Hate messages towards the LGBT community. And that becomes an input into the AI. AI sees that, it's a machine, it objectively processes it. So, okay, we've got some people, these people, 250 people in this town, hate LGBTQ folks. Okay, the output, this is the content that you need to see. So every time they log on to Facebook, that's what they see, right? They're not going to see other things. So they think that that is their world, right? There's lots and lots of people who don't like LGBTQ. Highly problematic. So what's the answer? Obviously, regulation. How do we get it? Well, that's the $64,000 question. So, but let's think about this. To what extent is machine learning bad or good? What sort of ethics can be put in place where the applications of machine learning can actually help humanity? Well, for instance, medical diagnoses are becoming better and better as a result of the collection of data going into AI, and AI giving us good diagnosis, where right now, this is the process. Say you're a physician working at Kaiser, and the system gives you this. And then you look at it, but you have experience with diseases and with different patients, and you know about genetics and so on. And so you evaluate the result that AI has given you, and then you, as the physician, make the decision about treatment and what is the prognosis at the end and all the rest of it. But if we leave that to AI, if we get people like Mark Zuckerberg in charge of applications for machine learning towards medical diagnoses, all he's going to think about is, well, how can I make the greatest profit for me and the other shareholders that are part of my cohort when AI takes over and we get rid of the physicians, right? And then inequality sets in. And then we've got all kinds of problems where the human element being removed from the medical field. I'm not saying that's happening right now, but that's what Stuart Russell and his cohorts are talking about. Let's worry about that stuff and let's start having plans about what to do. Automatic language translation. You seen the movie Lost in Translation? You ever hear that term? Oh, lost in translation. I was talking to this person from this other country, and he was saying this, but then culturally I didn't understand it, and he meant this, but I got really mad at him. Next thing you know, the friendship is over. So those are the problematics, but it's a wonderful technology, isn't it? Again, if we have the human element involved in this world, then we got something going. Okay. So the 7 patterns of AI are interesting. And again, the question is, how can we bring the humanistic elements, humanistic ethics into using the 7 patterns into a better future for all of us? So how do we teach ethics to AI? Well, when it comes to ethics, there are 3 types of ethics. Of course, there are branches to this. Meta-ethics is about the language of ethics and moral reasoning. Normative ethics is about content, moral behavior. So this is where different prescriptions for behavior are produced as a result of ethical theories. Like non-consequential theory says, never lie under any circumstances. Utilitarian theory says, well, take actions considering consequences so you can produce the greatest good for the greatest majority. Descriptive ethics says, let's look at the facts, because ethics is all about facts and our values. It's always the intersection of facts and values. And let's look at the statistics, let's look at the facts, and let's see what those numbers can help us move forward with actions and policies and so forth. Can we teach this to AI? Well, the answer is yes, but the question, when it comes to singularity and people are saying, well, we will combine with machines or, all become one and all the rest of it. The question always is, can AI have compassion, imagination, empathy, the kind of virtues that we pride ourselves on for being human, right? When we think about loyalty towards friends, when we think about courage, right? Taking actions to save somebody's life, knowing that our lives could be at stake. Those kinds of things. That's what we like to say to ourselves, thinking that, we're human beings. And these are the kinds of things that make us human. We can have compassion. We can also have the level of consciousness that we are aware of our own death, our own mortality. So there's a lot of technologies trying to kind of reverse that process. I said, well, we're going to make you immortal, right? And that could be a topic of another presentation. I've actually done that where we've talked about, transferring your consciousness into an AI-based, computer, and so you become immortal. Because everything, all your memories, all your history, and everything is there, and you're feeding it. You do edge computing with it, and then so if your biological body expires, you're still there. All right, so, okay. A couple of examples of how, AI can be used for different kinds of ethics. The one that the Chinese retailer giant, Alibaba, created, it outscored humans in the Stanford question answering data set. And that's a difficult test. And this is a fact. I got this from Newsweek report about 3 years ago, but things are also evolving. Unfortunately, we don't have that much access to what's happening in China. They are on the edge of, AI technologies. And it's always kind of scary to think about, what are they doing with all this stuff, and what are they thinking, and where are they going with it? What is this collectivism that they have in their society telling them? Are they also discussing the ethical implications as we are today? To what extent is critical thinking a part of their education, etc.? I mean, these are some questions that I have, and I'm always in inquiry about. Then there was the example of the books that were used to teach human ethics, kind of like the stuff I just talked about a second ago, to AI. And this was one team from School of Interactive Computing at Georgia Institute of Technology that did this in 2016 very successfully. So ultimately, the question is, what kind of world do you want? Do you want the world that exists in this TV channel in the UK, where they just sell useless goods, unnecessary material to people, and get you hooked on consumerism? Because if you're not the consumer, as they say, you're the product. And you're always the consumer and the product when you're in that world. Or do we want a world that has all of this stuff? Integrity, conscience, fairness, honor, egalitarianism in a society. So we've come to the end of the formal presentation, and let's do some dialogue. I think we have time.
Thank you so much, Tony, for the excellent talk. Very good insights into the society when it comes to ethical issues with AI. I think this is a wonderful food for thought for our students and everyone who's attending. So let's see if our students or anyone in the audience has questions for Tony. You can either put it on chat or you can unmute yourself and talk. So we have Christine Stark, who has a question for Tony.
Okay, well, I just wanted to ask him, you went so quickly over the 7 patterns of AI. Could you review that? What those are?
The 7 patterns?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I have to go back to the slide, right?
Well, if you could, I don't know. I mean, because I haven't seen that before. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. We can do that. Why not? Very quickly. The slides change.
I definitely screenshotted that slide. That was interesting.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just summarize it. How about that? Right. And then later on, Christine, if you come to the round table, we can expand on it. There's a predictive pattern, right? Because AI, with all the human related data that it gets, and then the machine learning, one computer learning from another computer, absent the human element, right? Because once you get that going, you don't need humans coming in and being, intervening and being the intermediaries. So one machine is teaching the other machine, and deep learning takes place. So that's one pattern, and it's already happened, right? So we have to think about the ethical implications of that, and to what extent we can make that pattern be a humanistic pattern. Then there is the notion of defense, which is not set up in the pattern, but AI protecting humanity. And this is where I'm always thinking about, well, how can an artificial intelligence be in the realm of uncertainty? As human beings, we can be. Like right now, I'm uncertain of how to answer this question where, it doesn't take up a whole hour, getting into this stuff. And so it's uncertain, but at the same time, I want to satisfy a response. Can AI do that, or does AI basically just follow the prescriptions that are given to it and then make a decision, and by power of deduction and so forth? So those are a couple of areas to think about, and we can expand upon that on the round table. In the interest of time, I want to allow other people to come in and ask questions.
By the way, I just uploaded the screenshot of that slide to the chat.
Okay, good. Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much, David.
Dr. Kashani. How you doing, Dr. Kashani?
Hi, Andreas. How are you?
I'm all right. I just wanna. I guess I have a rhetorical question or a question because I know AI, like you explained it, it could be used for good and it could be used for evil. For example, the Arab Spring started in Tunisia, was started by a Facebook chat that spread through Tunisia, that spread to Egypt and toppled the Mubarak regime and started this wonderful revolution. Also, I see how it destroys my kids on Facebook and WhatsApp. They ask, why do I need to learn this, mister, when all I can do is ask Google? And also, for example, the anti-vaxxers or this whole BS about the election was stolen, which led to the insurrection, which lead to our losing our democracy in the United States, et cetera, et cetera. And as a teacher, I would like to know how, because I use technology, but also it's kind of like I tell my kids, if I had a child, I wouldn't have my kids have a phone. So how can we use this technology, like you say, to save humanity rather than destroy it? There has to be a fine balance where we can get Zuckerberg and all these CEOs to be able to be, how do we get ethics into them without, because it's all about money, how can we get ethics into it without, killing ourselves, which is basically what humanity's head toward.
Yeah, this is, thank you for bringing this up. This is the central moral question that we have to ask ourselves. The fact is that, let's say, with Facebook, only 9% of Facebook users are in the United States. The other 91% is outside the United States. Let's keep that in mind and gain perspective on that. What happens here with so little regulation, to some extent, people are educated about technology and then they try to put a stop to it by using Facebook to tell about the evils of Facebook. But 3.5 billion people on Earth, I mentioned this number earlier, are directly connected to the internet. And out of that 3.5 billion, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 billion use Facebook as basically their internet. And when I say Facebook, I'm also talking about WhatsApp that Andreas mentioned, and Instagram. In countries like Iran, people basically just go to Instagram and WhatsApp to get their news, to share news, and to connect, organize, etc. And so Facebook becomes the outlet to the world and the primary source of worldview. And we know that the idea for Facebook is not so much like, the message, oh, we want to connect people so we can all, sing kumbaya and be this world peace and so on. We've seen the examples of it, right? In India, Mark Zuckerberg making a deal with Modi, the current Prime Minister of India, and Hinduism, national Hinduism, persecuting Muslims and other minorities and basically non-Hindus on a fast pace, right? Hate messages and all kinds of campaigns, propaganda campaigns, and fake news and misinformation and basically the hate environment was created vis-a-vis Facebook and nothing else. And the results have been devastating. So how can we do this? This is the ultimate question, right? Well, one answer is let's break them up. Let's break up Facebook. Let's break up Amazon. Let's break up Google. Let's break up Twitter and turn them into little companies. Allow competition to come in. Let's have serious regulation. I mean, when there's an oil spill happening somewhere, say in Southern California recently, in Huntington Beach, it happened, regulators come in and they enforce new regulations on oil companies. Why can't we do that with these social media companies? Well, we must. And I'm hoping that we move towards that, because what's happening, everything is created here, but the rest of the world is getting either the suffering or the benefits of it, right? Who gets the benefits? Oftentimes it's the elite, right? And then everybody else has to suffer. And then we're addicted to this stuff. And addiction is very difficult to leave, as everyone knows. So let's hope for a breakup and regulation sooner rather than later.
We also touched about it in class. We're talking about hacking. We could hack the system to work against it.
Yeah, well, that's what we need to do. Yeah, and we're doing that now. With the Zoom technology here, we're getting people from different parts of the country together and talking about this stuff, talking about turning the tables on these systems that collect our data without our permission. and we're not privy to the profiles that they create about us. Yeah.
Our leaders also need ethics. Our leaders definitely need, we have lack thereof ethics in our leadership in this country, the world for that matter. I'm sorry, I'll shut up.
Okay, we have two students who are requesting that can they have the soft copy of your slides? So you have any suggestion on that, Tony?
Copy of the slides. I'll take that under consideration and write it down here to see if I can share that with folks. We can certainly put it on the Applied Humanities website. And, you know, it's a question of, you know, some slides, you know, have copyright issues, whether they do or not, for what use. Somebody, you know, gets a monetary use out of them, then we're in trouble. But if it's just for nonprofit use, not a problem at all. So I will definitely look into that.
Okay, there's a question by Tia April that what is the balance, if there is a balance between commercialism and humanism? And we have a bunch of questions down also. So if you want to go one by one on these questions.
On the chat, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so let me take a look.
So next is Tia April. What is the balance, if there's a balance between commercialism and humanism?
Okay. This is a big question, right? One would say the humanism in me says, of course, there is a balance. We can always find balance. I think it was Heidegger that said that technology and humans are always part of one process. In other words, when I grab this pen and start writing with it, it's a technology I'm using. The pen becomes part of me, right? My hand and the pen are part of the same entity. So the balance is right there. Right? We have to use technology, but the values that we put in place in relation to technology generates the algorithm, if you will, for us to decide to what extent do we want to participate in consumerism, commercialism, if you like, and to what extent we want to use these technologies for humanistic ideas. For example, if we wanted to, as human societies, particularly in the rich, you know, developed world, United States, European Union, etc., Canada, if we wanted to end world hunger, AI could help us immediately, right? Feed the data, who needs what, where, eliminate corruption as a result of data that goes in there and gets processed, analyzed, and AI gives us a set of policies and action, a list of actions we can take to end world hunger, right? It can be done. Jeffrey Sachs wrote a book about ending world hunger. I have a copy here that maybe I'll grab for the roundtable. He's collected a lot of data about doing this. And we have all these billionaires in the world, corporations that have more money than the GDP of their income is more than GDP of many countries. And yet they don't lift a finger to do this. And technology is available to us. So that's where we find the balance, right? How do we get there, right? So Andreas was talking about our leaders needing to have ethics. Well, we need new leaders. We need better leaders. So bottom up will give us the balance. That's my short answer to the tough question. So Dan, hi Dan. Yeah, Dan is asking a question. Right? How do you feel about the momentum the world is presently on in regards to neoliberalism versus humanity? That's a good question. That Dan is always, you know, challenging me. I don't know how I feel about it. I am, you know, as I always say, you know, I get a lot of mileage out of Antonio Gramsci saying that I like to apply the pessimism of the intellect, see the facts, and kind of get, oh my God, look at what's happening here. And then the level of inequality that technologies are paradoxically producing. And then the optimism of the will tells me that we are at the cusp of it, right? I'm seeing that with Gen Z, Generation Z, the new kids that are actually thinking, I don't want this stuff. I don't want to be tied into thinking about the next Air Jordans and that will become my world. I don't want to be a YouTube influencer. I want a life where I can be happy. And that's where, humanity is about, or ought to be about. So I'm very optimistic. I'm always optimistic. Now, I can't have predictions. I'm not Ray Kurzweil, I'm not going to have predictions. Yeah. But what great questions, right? What challenging questions here.
We have another question from Konstantin.
Yes, I
Do
see
you
this.
see AI impacting global citizenship in the next 30 years, helping evolve human society into a more equity-based model?
This is a wonderful, wonderful question. And as Konstantin probably already knows, discourses around the world are happening around this very idea, right? Eliminating the borders, because nationalism has been a cancer to humanity. I mean, we had a president not long ago that was promoting this toxic nationalism with white supremacy in the backdrop. And look where that got us. And we need global citizenship, absolutely. And in the next 30 years, could that happen? Well, the idea of universal basic income is being talked about in almost every society you can think about, whether it's developing world or right here in the Bay Area. Those kinds of ideas bring us together, and we recognize the interconnectedness of all. We've had setbacks by seeing like the Brexit in the UK, where ignorance and AI technology produced some level of ignorance where the citizens of the UK wanted to leave the European Union, and look where we are. But that can change very quickly. So the short answer is I absolutely see it, and I absolutely want it. And I think when you talk to any human being, they'll say, well, I want to get to know the other. And then once they start getting to know the other, they'll see that the other is same as the self. Cosmetically, we're different, but internally, consciousness-wise, really not all that different. We all want the same things. So an erosion of boundaries between nations has to happen, but first we have to do something about the domination by billionaires who are transnational, right? They already have the global citizenship, but it's for them. It's for the 1% of the world. So how can we reverse that so the 1% becomes 99%, and then we can have global citizenship? It's a great question, and I'm always for that. I'm always thinking that that's going to happen, and why not? We are seeing some trends here in the U.S. People wanting to have unions, people wanting to become part of a big collective, people wanting to be dealing with the global ideas. Climate crises, as awful and menacing as it seems to us about eliminating humanity from the universe, is also bringing us together, right? Because every single one of us is affected by that. To what extent can AI give us efficient, renewable energy? Great extent. To what extent can AI give us building materials so we don't pollute the earth with cement and metals and all kinds of things? Great extent. And all these efficiencies that AI can bring us. But then we have to have democratic data input into AI before we can get there, right? So hopefully we'll get there. So what else do we have?
Konstantin has sent you a reply. Thank you for a very thought-provoking educational response and presentation. And then Michaela has a question. As AI becomes increasingly prevalent, do you think that access to it and knowledge of how it works and how to utilize it will be restricted or made more difficult to obtain for certain groups of people, the same as other resources currently are?
Well, that's already happening. Out of billions of users of the internet technologies, we're ignorant to what's happening behind the scenes, right? So it's not enough for people to learn how to code, right? Because that's easy. You can take an online class and learn how to code. But how to code, it doesn't make you part of the power dynamics. So first we have to go and open up capitalism and turn it into a market economy that allows for institutes and entities to provide the education. around these technologies on a democratic basis. So it starts with K through 12, and then it goes beyond, right, at the university level. So right now, discourses between humanities folks, I mean, I know this is happening at MIT at a great level, right? But MIT is really a place for the elite, isn't it? The cream of the crop go to MIT. The cream of the crop are invited to these conferences and so on. But can we do that on a global scale? That's what's needed. Can we be privy to the discourses at MIT? Can we be privy to the discourses at UC Berkeley with Stuart Russell's, program and so forth? That could open it up where the response to this question would be yes, it's going to happen. Yeah.
Okay, I think we are almost at the end of our session. It's 2 o'clock already. And so any one last question, if anyone has, or we can round up our speech over here. Anyone who has one last question? It looks like a lot of students are saying bye-bye. So we will see. I think there is...
There was one question that, going back to the slide with the categories and so on, and we can deal with that at the roundtable, or I can, later on respond to that via email. Please feel free to email me with questions. That'll be fine.
Okay. So it looks like we have the permission now to wrap up because people are planning to leave. So thank you so much, Dr. Tony Kashani, a very prolific speaker indeed, and he's proved it even in our presentation today. Thank you so much to bring all these beautiful insights into the very base of ethical issues in AI. And we hope to have you speak more on the issue in future. Constantine was already asking when is Dr. Tony, coming to speak again. So we already see fans coming for you. So thank you so much, Tony. And we are going to end this presentation right over here, but we will see, I hope we see all of you in our 3 o'clock roundtable with Dr. Tony. And we have 2 other very, very magnificent presenters who are going to be our panelists for the roundtable. So we'll see everyone at 3 o'clock at the roundtable. So please don't go, come back.
And thank you so much. It was a great privilege.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.